the story of one of the significant figures in the Old Testament, Samuel. The story of Samuel starts with his father, Elkanah, who had two wives, Peninnah and Hannah. With Peninnah he had children, but Hannah wasn't able to bear children. And they used to go to the place of worship every year, and Hannah would pray that she might be able to have a child. She was praying outside the small temple that they had there one time, and her lips were moving, we're told, but you couldn't hear words. She was talking to God within herself. The priest Eli, who ought to have known better, came to a very judgmental conclusion and accused her of being drunk. And she said, "No, I'm not drunk. I'm praying." And she told him what she was praying for. And he told her to go and hope that God would bless her. She became pregnant and she did have a child, Samuel. And she had promised in her prayer that if God gave her a son, then she would dedicate the son to working at the temple. And in some sort of way, we don't really quite know what happened. It wasn't part of the normal practice. She passed the young Samuel over to Eli in the temple for Eli to look after him, mentor him, bring him up, and have him work in the temple. Samuel was in a difficult situation there. The temple was in Shiloh. It was, as I said, probably fairly small. The Ark of the Covenant, the large box that contained the stones with the Ten Commandments, was stored there. And Eli was the priest, and his sons were also priests there, but they were wasters, and Eli had no control over them, it seemed. And he'd already been warned that his line was going to come to an end fairly shortly. And then at that point we take up the Bible story. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel." And he said, "Here I am," and ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So Samuel went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But Eli said, "I did not call, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. The Lord called Samuel again a third time, and he got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli said to Samuel, "Go, lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling as before, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Then the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I'm about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears of it tingle. On that day I'll fulfill against Eli all that I've spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. For I've told him that I'm about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering ever." Samuel lay there until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli, but Eli called Samuel and said, "Samuel, my son." He said, "Here I am." Eli said, "What was it that God told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more also if you hide anything from me of all that he told you." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. Then Eli said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." Apart from being a good story, there are some subtle nuances in there in the way that there often are in Bible stories. We hear that the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There were no frequent visions, and correspondingly, Eli's sight was dimming. He was becoming blind. And we're told that Eli was lying in his own room, whereas Samuel was in the temple where the Ark of God was. So, both literally and figuratively, Samuel is shown as being closer to God. Samuel was born at a time when there was no king in Israel. There was a power vacuum in a sense, and people were living for themselves, some of them using power irresponsibly, like Eli's sons. God seemed to be inactive at that time. The word of the Lord was rare. I wonder if that seems like the way things often are nowadays. Truth is being rewritten in all sorts of unexpected and dangerous ways. People are controlling narratives and politicizing all sorts of things for their own gain. Who are the Samuels that are called to speak truth to power these days? How can we hear God's voice and know that it's true? These are big questions, and they are beyond the scope of this short video to address. But for each one of us, God's call is personal. He calls us by name. Samuel, Samuel, Sandy, Sandy. We matter to God. We matter to his purposes for the world. Each of us has a part to play, without which the world will be incomplete. Do we have an Eli to help us to recognize God's voice? Someone to mentor us? Can we be an Eli for others? Let's join together in prayer. Lord, thank you that no matter how it seems, you are not inactive. Perhaps we don't hear your voice very much because we're not listening. We're making too much noise. We're rushing around trying to do our own thing. We're drawing our own conclusions and not thinking about you. But you are there, and you are calling, and you're trying to guide us, and you have a plan for each one of us, a part for each of us to play. Lord, help us to be quiet, to put our own thoughts aside for a time, to let go of our desires and see if there's a message from you. Help us to be around people who can help us to find you, help us to help one another. Help us to encourage one another, to see just what you might be saying, so that bit by bit your voice can get through, and person by person, one at a time, this world can be turned back to you and be the place that you always wanted it to be. Amen. There's been music playing through the video as usual, and the music is from a hymn. Hushed was the evening hymn. The hymn is about this story about Eli and Samuel, and I'm going to finish the video playing the whole tune through with the words so that you can follow it through yourself. Go now in the blessing of God, and may you know God's love surround you and yours today and always. Amen. Bye-bye just now. Thanks for joining.